When it comes to supports for 3D prints, I always thought things were pretty simple, and it turns out I was kind of wrong in a lot of ways. There are so many subtleties and so many nuances that help supports be as supportive as possible, and I didn't really know a lot of that, because for a long time using older printers that only had one nozzle and the ability to do one material at a time, you kind of just either turned supports on or off, and if you turned them on, they were just the same material that your print was being printed in. With the advent of multi-material printers, that means now you can switch between your print material and your support material, and you can do that on a single nozzle printer, something like the P2S or even the Bambu A1s. Although if you do a multi-support, multi-material print on a single nozzle, you are going to increase your print time and the amount of waste produced. So dual nozzle printers are kind of ideal for that. And the X2D is an excellent example of that, because that was kind of one of the big selling points. Is you have the traditional main nozzle, and then you have this auxiliary nozzle that has most of the functionality of the main nozzle, but ideally it would work really well for support material. So you have your main material at the main nozzle, and then you have the second nozzle just to add supports, and it can do both at the same time, and that gives you a lot of versatility, and then also speeds up print time because you can just do both at the same time. So when I say I've been learning a lot about 3D printing, what I mean by that is I've been getting support primarily from comments to the other videos I made, where people have helped me kind of understand better ways to do things, both with the printers that I have and in the software for Bambu printers, which, you know, I've only been using for 6 months or so at this point, so it's all still relatively new to me. And if you're new to 3D printing and you're not even sure what I mean when I'm talking about supports, prints like this, a flat print, they don't need any support. It's simple, it's easy, the printer can just print like that. But it's when you have situations like, imagine this print, or, you know, the example here that we're gonna get to in a second. Imagine this print, we're printing vertically for some reason, and you have an overhang, and you also have these areas here. If you think about it, how can the printer print this? Because it would have to print in midair, and that is pretty difficult. If it's not too far, the printer can actually bridge the gap a little bit, but even then, the first few layers oftentimes sag and get a little bit stringy, and then it gets solid again, so the quality is not ideal. So what supports do is kind of looks like this back here. The printer basically adds support structures that hold things up, and then when you're done printing, those are just removed. And usually they're designed to kind of snap away pretty easily and use as little material as possible. Now there is a bit of nuance to when you need supports. The general rule of thumb is about 45 degrees. So if you have something that's 45 degrees or less, usually the printer can handle it without supports, but then it also has to do with how you're orienting things on the build plate. Something like this, you could say, okay, if that's less than 45 degrees, I don't need supports, but also I can just print it this way, and then there's no problem at all. The issue comes when you have situations where no matter how you orient something, there's going to be overhangs and things that require supports. So when I got the X2D and the second nozzle is really being promoted as ideal for supports, that kind of kicked it into gear, like, okay, I should use different materials for supports. And in the video I made about this, I used a lot of PETG material for PLA supports. And the reason I did that is because PLA and PETG don't stick together. So if you're trying to make a model that incorporates both those materials, it's not gonna really work very well. But if you need to make a support structure and you want it to just kind of hold things up temporarily and then break away very easily, it works really well if the two materials don't go together very well. But in that video, I was having some quality issues because the PETG supports were just printing a little bit funky and things weren't working that well. And that's where, believe it or not, the YouTube comment section was actually a helpful thing. And so thank you to everybody who shared some insight to me. And basically the big takeaway was that yes, you can use the second nozzle for support material, but you don't necessarily want to use it, make the supports all out of that material. And in my case, doing a PLA print with PETG supports, what that meant is that PETG and PLA require different temperatures, especially on the build plate. And so it's like the printer is trying to accommodate for two different materials that have two different requirements in the same environment and with the same temperatures, and it just doesn't work that well. So there is a pretty smart way around it, which is basically just to do this. This is a support I took off of a print, and if you notice, it's purple, and then there's a little bit of white. What that is, the purple is PLA. That's the same material I was using for the rest of the print, and then the white is actually a support material. And so in Bambu Studio, there's a setting where you can set the support to just be on interface layers only. And that means it's only going to use that material on parts of the support that actually touch the print. And so that means most of the support can be one material, probably the same material that you're doing the main print with, and then just that little layer right there where it's going to touch the actual print, that can be the separate material, and then the print it will work very well. The support will, you can see this looks good. And then when it's time to take it off, boop, it just comes off super easily. And you can even take things a step further in Bambu Studio, not just using whatever material you want for the interface layer, but you can choose specifically what material you want to use for the supports themselves if you don't want to just default to the same material is being used for the rest of the print. So it lets you really manage what materials you're using, which I think is something that can be super helpful. So let's look at this print here. There's a little bit of false advertising here because I printed this on my H2C, so it wasn't printed on the X2D. And the reason I did this on the H2C is that it is too big. It didn't quite, it's like slightly too big to fit on the build plate there. But if you look at this, there are actually 3 materials being used here. So this was kind of a good example of a way that you can use those settings. The blue is the main structure. The kind of gold color is the support material. This is just also PLA. And then you can sort of see little bits of white here and there, and that is actually the support material. In this case, I wasn't using PETG. I was actually trying out Bambu's specific support material. So this is support for PLA, and that means this is a type of filament designed specifically to be support material, so it will print with PLA and it won't stick to PLA. This is not intended to be used for actual parts themselves. I don't really know what would happen if you try to print a model with this, but this is a brand new roll and it looks kind of empty, so I don't really want to waste this. It just, you know, can be a little bit expensive, which is also then why it's good to sort of split things up a bit and not use your specialized material for anything but the interface layers. Like my PETG filament is more expensive, so being able to save that is good. Now the reason here that I use this color for the supports is because I don't really use this color that much. It's cool, but like I have a lot of it and it's pretty niche. I don't do a lot of sort of goldish, brownish, tan kind of prints. So that is a material that I was okay using for support material. This blue I use all the time, so I didn't want to use a lot of it and waste it on the support material here, and obviously I didn't want to waste my actual support material that I spent extra money on. And I wanted to show you this before I removed the support, so that way we could kind of talk about a few issues I've been having. You can kind of see it here. There are little bits of stringiness, and even for some reason, if you kind of look at this here, for some reason this support area just started printing really funky, and then the top actually broke off, and so that actually did mean that this part of the print, thankfully this is kind of a prototype so it's okay, this part of the print didn't come out all that great because it didn't have any supports. If you're wondering, these two things were a design that somebody sent to me to help mount my Rodecaster Duo and Rodecaster Video into kind of like one unit on top of each other, so I'm pretty excited for this, but these are early like prototype designs that were sent, so that's pretty cool. Now the other reason I did this on the H2C was because I was doing 3 materials. I could do that on the X2C. I can have the main material on the main nozzle, and then I can set the secondary nozzle. If you have an AMS hooked up to it, you can have it switch between filaments. It's going to have to, you know, purge and do a waste thing every time, so it's gonna be kind of inefficient to mix multiple things, but it is possible. On the H2C, since it has more than 2 nozzles, it has 2 active nozzles, but you can swap the different tool heads interchangeably. That meant that I could have one of them having this gold material and one of them having the print material, and every time it needed to switch between them, it could just grab a different nozzle and keep printing. So this was kind of ideal for the H2C. Now, the tricky part is I'm not really sure what to do about prime towers, so maybe you can help me. I did use a prime tower on some prints, and it does seem to help, especially with the PLA support material. If it's just doing little bits without the prime tower, it seems like the nozzle's not primed enough to really kind of lay it down smoothly. So it seems like that helps, but even the prime towers themselves looked weird and had kind of like some weird stringing happening. So I'm not sure when you're doing this kind of a workflow with supports, do you need a prime tower or not? Maybe it's a case-by-case basis. I like not using prime towers because then it saves a lot of time and material. You know, when you print something like this and then it has a prime tower, you're gonna have a thing that's this tall that you just throw away, and it just feels wasteful, but maybe that is something that's necessary. All that to say, when it comes to the actual end results, if this were all PLA, stuck to PLA, and I took these off, it would actually be kind of difficult. I would rip these off and I would probably need to go in here and sand these and file it down. Now, ideally, what I should be able to do is just break these away and it should be pretty clean. So let's see. I guess it goes both ways, right? The PLA came off of the support material, but now, oh, look at that. It really does just peel off. The supports themselves come off, and then you can take out the white PLA supports. So overall, this is the cleanest support removal I've ever had on a part like this. Normally that would require a lot of cleanup and a lot of processing. The only downsides are that area here where the support failed and then this got a little messy. And then the other thing, if you look on the bottom, there were some areas where it used the support material and then the PLA, but there's also some areas where it just put the PLA on the PLA, and this is a little bit harder to remove. So I still might have to go through here with like a deburring tool or a file or something to get that off entirely, but that shouldn't be too difficult. And that's one of those things that's probably more user error than anything. But that's why I wanted to make this video, was to kind of show what I've learned, where I'm at, and the mistakes that I'm making right now. So that way you can hopefully learn from me and from those mistakes. And if you have more knowledge than I do, which is sometimes a low bar, but if you have more knowledge than I do, I definitely appreciate more insights into things I can do, more support into how I can use my supports.